so thank you for jumping on this. I'm so curious. You have such a cool, unique background, and going into an area that you kind of are kind of foraging yourself around this whole beliefs around age and ageism, and it's like so fascinating. I'm just stoked to just
Oh, good.
straight up have this conversation. So before we get into that and your book, um, I mean, obviously you got into psychology, and then what? I guess my question is, as you were kind of unpacking the mysteriousness of us as humans through your studies, at what point did age kind of come in and go, hey, I want to take my fellowship, I want to start diving into that? What happened, and why did you kind of start going down this path?
Oh, yeah, that's great. So how did I get interested in looking at
Yeah,
aging and aging health?
yeah, yeah.
I first decided that was a topic I really wanted to focus in on after my first job after college.
Hmm.
The first job that I got was in a psychiatric hospital, and the only job they had was on a geriatric unit. And I really hesitated to take the job. I had studied psychology as an undergrad, so I wanted to do something in psychology, but I wasn't intending to do anything with older people. But I decided to try the job for 2 weeks just to see what it was like. And even though I had a lot of stereotypes, I thought it was going to be a very depressing job. But I ended up really enjoying the job. I really enjoyed getting to know the people who were recovering, and I really enjoyed this multidisciplinary perspective to understand how to improve their health. And I saw a lot of resiliency that I wasn't expecting. I saw a lot of treatment and recovery, and a lot of people working together to think about how biology and psychology and the mind brain, how it all comes together in later life. That sort of sparked a lot of ideas that I really wanted to go into that area.
Wow, that's cool. What were some of those back then? And we can get into what you know now. What are some of those things that kind of were shocking when you kind of had them do a little course correction? What were some of those things that stood out?
In that particular
Yeah, in
experience,
that
you're asking?
particular time, yeah.
Yeah. So I think I thought it was going to be just a very short-term job because I would just find
Yeah.
it too hard, too challenging. That I thought I had this view that I had this misperception that older people weren't going to be able to recover, that they weren't going to be able to benefit from therapy. And little by little, I just saw all these cases of people of older people who had great stories to tell, had all these interesting experiences, and were able to reflect back on their lives and grow as they're in their time. So I got to see a lot of sort of mental health growth during that time. So yes, there were a lot of like little moments where I was like, whoa, that's really interesting that we can see these benefits in later life. And then I started to think about, could there be things in our culture in particular that it can be contributing to health? If all of these factors are coming together, what about the cultural differences might make a difference? That kind of led to a bunch of other ideas that led to my current focus on these beliefs about aging that exist in a culture.
Yeah, I mean, just to say right away, so people can go check it out right now. I'm breaking the age code, which is such a great kind of a title, and how your age beliefs determine how long and well you live, right? And so that is just wildly fascinating just to contemplate. um, but then again, I'm so fascinated with the resiliency, because it's like, the as we age, and especially since you kind of took that job, it's like at a certain point we kind of don't we have, it's more of a question, like sign people off, like that's it, they're over this amount, they've got some comorbidities, they're in a home, they're just waiting to die. And it's kind of messed up, right? And so it's weird, And the one hand, you can flip cultures around the world and go, that's not the case, right? It's like, I've seen it. I've been around circles of elders in the middle of Africa. And you're like, no, that's not, definitely not the case. It is, they're revered, they're apart, they're supporting the children, they're participating, and, you know, and their wisdom, they're just oozing wisdom of life. So maybe just touching on the culture here. What the hell are we doing? What are we doing? Like, why we've got it? I would imagine we've got it wrong. Like, what are we doing, and how can we change the culture around our aging paradigm?
Right. Yes, that's so important. And what you've said that you've noticed in looking at these different cultures, that's exactly what sparked my interest in this topic. So when I was in graduate school, I received this fellowship to go to Japan. And when I was there, and the goal of my fellowship was to actually try to understand why they had the longest lifespan in the world. And I didn't really have any preconceptions of what I was going to find when I got there. But what I immediately noticed when I arrived was how differently the culture treated the older people. And it was just so different from what I was used to seeing in Boston, where I was living at the time, where there was a lot of ageism I was observing. In Japan, in contrast, I noticed that older people were treated like rock stars on television. So centenarians and super centenarians were celebrated on TV, and they're written their comic book format, and they had this national holiday celebrating older people. And so I became really interested in this question: is it possible that the more positive age beliefs that existed that do exist in Japan, could those actually correspond to their survival advantage, or having this really long lifespan? And that actually led to a set of ideas that I explored in studies going forward, and found really support for that.
Wow. Because it's like, you know, we do want to, you know, we want to understand it. I mean, the whole idea of aging, of course, we want to crack that open and go, what's the fountain of youth, what's all that stuff? But it's, as you look, it's infinitely it's a web, right? And we want to reduce things down. And of course, you know, the blue zones and all of that stuff, what are people eating, what are they doing, all of that stuff. But I think there's something that you're getting into here that is, it seems more subtle, but it also seems, from my perspective, just in this intuitive hit right now, it actually feels more powerful than almost anything. Because is that correct?
Yes, I mean, I think what you're saying, I mean, it seems like it's very subtle, but there are these messages everywhere. And I think, and we know children as young as 3 have already taken in these age beliefs of their culture, and then they're reinforced over time. And often we don't even know that we have these age beliefs, because they can operate without our awareness. Unconsciously, we can take them in. And children take them in long before they're relevant to who they are. They're not yet older people. Those are their future selves. So there's no need to kind of resist them. I mean, if they're presented with a negative message, such as one of the earliest messages that I remember receiving was about aging, was when I was a kid. I was told the story of Hansel and Gretel. And I don't know if you were told that one, but it's just like this image of this older woman who wants to eat children, and she's basically a cannibal, right? And I remember thinking that was just this really scary image. And why is it that that's a story that we tell our children? But if you look in other cultures, they have very different kinds of stories that they're telling their children. So there are these messages that are very sort of baked into our culture, but we can recognize them and overcome them. So they're not set in stone. They are things that we can actively shift.
But unless you look at them, you can't do anything about it, right? Unless they come out from under the subconscious and come to a place where we can consciously unpack them and look at them. We all know if we don't look at something, it doesn't go away, and in fact, it probably gets worse and bigger, and you know, and not good for anybody. So maybe just unpacking a little bit, like the definitions here, like what is, you know, you use the term ageism, and then let's start maybe percolating on some of the other kind of beliefs that are embedded into our American culture here and maybe people can kind of start to walk away from this episode going, shit, I'm walking around, because you certainly look at money, right? You can look at money as a very like, you know, money's the root of all evil and all of this weird shit that we have around money and abundance. But I think this is a very important thing that we need to shed light on. So what are some of the definitions of ageism and how we can start to look at this differently?
Yeah, so ageism. So there is the person who first coined this is a psychiatrist named Robert Butler, and he defined ageism as discrimination against people based on being older, and simply on their age, denying them opportunities, and it can include these negative age beliefs. And he actually first coined the term when he noticed a housing complex in DC where the residents decided that they didn't want older people to move into the housing complex. And so he tried to come up with a term to describe how is it that they can deny opportunities to people just because they're older. And so he started, and so we know since then that ageism can operate, as we talked about, unconsciously, implicitly. We also know it can exist structurally. So it can exist in sort of the power structures of society, which makes the World Health Organization recently came out with this statement that because ageism is so built into our structure, it's one of the least understood, least recognized forms of prejudice that exists today, and one of the most socially condoned. But I think what's really important is that we can become cognizant of it. We can become aware of it. There are skills that we can take that will increase our awareness and allow us to strengthen the positive age beliefs. So I think there is this hopeful message, and there are skills that we can learn at any age.
So what are some of those things that we can start to kind of play with here that can percolate some of this stuff for people to go like, oh, I didn't even realize that I was carrying that.
Right, exactly. So I think one of the most powerful things that we can do is to increase our awareness. And there's two parts to this. One is to increase our own awareness, or our own, how we think about our own age beliefs, and also increase our awareness of the age beliefs and the messages about aging that we encounter all around us. And so one method, so in the book, Breaking the Age Code, I present about 15 or so evidence-based methods that people can use to strengthen positive age beliefs and to reduce negative age beliefs. But one of the ones that I think is most powerful that people can start to do right away is something I call age belief journaling, which involves just for 1 week, writing down any portrayal of aging that you come across. So it could be, in a show that you're watching on Netflix. It could be in a conversation you're having with somebody in a coffee shop. It could be, a sign that you see at the airport that says something about aging. So it could be just about anything. And so whenever you see any portrayal of aging, write it down, and then also write down whether it's a positive portrayal or a negative portrayal. And if it's a negative portrayal, take a moment and think, is there another message, another portrayal of this older person that could have been presented? So there's this cranky, older man on a television show. Could that have been a different kind of image? Could it have actually been somebody who was giving advice to the grandchildren, in that show? So taking a moment to question some of the negative beliefs, and then also notice when they're absent. So there are many kind of conversations and things that we see that don't include older people. So also noticing omissions of older people is important, because we know that can lead to sort of marginalization and exclusion of older people.
Yeah, that's huge. And I mean, it's just as you bring up that example, I think of what was that those series of movies, a grumpy old man. And it's like, exactly. So just as you said that, of course, comes from my unconscious to my consciousness and says, oh, so there's this idea that when all men get old, that they're somehow grumpy, right? Exactly. And then we have a bunch of movies about them, and then they're portrayed as grumpy and all of this stuff. And it's like, and in fact, like it's funny getting ready for this call with you, I was reflecting on one of my favorite moments with my great uncle. And he was an old farmer in South Dakota back like a zoot suit wearing, when farmers went heavily subsidized, they had money, they took care of their family. It was just strong values. And I remember as he got older, he had a stroke and his arm was weird. And I didn't think it was weird, right? It was just him. It was Uncle Joe. And I remember sitting with my mother, just enthralled with hours of just listening to him talk, right? And I was just like, wow, I had a blast. And I was like 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
And something about my mom brought me with there. And I just continued to ask him questions. And the wisdom, and I think, and thank you for just this, because it maybe other people are getting something from this. And over my lifetime, there was a theme that throughout my life, my professors at the University of St. Thomas in Minnesota, I would ask them, even if they were my professor or someone else, someone I knew, I would just ask them about life, just because they were older and I thought they had more to say than someone my age. So what the hell are we missing as a result of this discriminatory kind of view that we're not getting in this culture? Like, my gosh, like Japan and those kind of cultures where they're embracing the wisdom and like, how did we survive even as cultures? Well, we passed down wisdom. You know, one can make an argument, we're not in this society, we're not making the wisest of choices. So what do you think? If you were a policymaker, and maybe not even saying that, but what can we do to extract and support this kind of, not only support of humans that are getting older, but support of this incredible vastness of wisdom that they've had while just living?
Yeah, so thank you. That's a great story. Yeah, about Uncle Joe is his name.
Uncle Joe, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I love that story. So yeah, I mean, I think I mean, so another thing that I suggest in breaking the age code, you know, so not only to increase our awareness, but I suggest developing what I call a portfolio of a diverse set of positive images or positive beliefs about aging. And so that's a great example of somebody that, you know, that you have in your portfolio. So I think we all have been exposed to some, you know, great older people. And I think, and it's great to also think about, you know, they can have different qualities that you admire. So it's particularly good to come up with a set of examples that maybe have different qualities that you would like to strengthen in yourself. So one person that you may have in your portfolio is, you know, an older relative who had a really good sense of humor, and somebody else could be a historical figure that you think had a great work ethic or sense of social justice you would really like to strengthen or connect to, you know. So I think we all have those images that we can draw on. And I think in some cultures, they're maybe put into the forefront a little bit more clearly than others, but I think we all have them. And that's actually one of the hopeful things I found in my research, is that when I ask people, you know, what are the first 5 words or phrases that come to mind, which is one of the questions that I use in my research to help people tell me what their beliefs about aging are. And most people will come up with negative beliefs first, but the positive thing is they also have, after the first couple that tend to be more negative, they tend to come up with some positive images or positive beliefs as well. So I think that we have them in our minds. It's just a matter of strengthening them and bringing them to the forefront and finding them as sources of inspiration.
Wow, that's cool. And that's the power of the question, or of a good question, right? And it's like, if you ask a good question, it's not that it's not there, and it's not that we don't have the awareness, but it's a matter of, are we taking the time to allow it to be there? And if we're not asked, we just kind of continue. We just kind of go. There was a recent study, has nothing to do with this, but I thought it was fascinating. It was a recent study that was done throughout a year, and they asked every person, no matter of demographic, that what do you feel when you buy this plastic water bottle? Without a doubt, well over 80% of the people, 86% of the people had anxiety. Right? It wasn't like they're running around with anxiety all the time, but it was there. And so when asked a question just like this, which is why I'm so excited that we're having this conversation, when you actually ask, what are your beliefs about your own aging? So that's very interesting. What is the most surprising? What are the themes that always seem to come up, especially in this, I guess, this kind of society that you find?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I think perhaps the most common negative age belief that comes up in my research is the idea that all cognition declines in all older people. And I think that comes up in a lot of different ways in messages that we get, in advertisements and different in popular culture in different ways. But we know from the science that just doesn't match the results. So we know that there's lots of different types of memory, and some types of memory stay the same, like, ability to remember how to ride a bike, procedural memory, and other types of memory actually seem to improve in later life, or types of cognition get stronger in later life, such as the skill of solving conflicts tends to get better in later life. Also, the skill of, it's called metacognition, or thinking about thinking, tends to get better in later life. So there are these skills that get better. And even in the types of cognition that we think of, that people in science think decline in later life, I've found in my research that if we promote the positive age beliefs, that even those types of cognition can improve. So there's just a lot of variability. And the other thing that was fun in writing the book was I got to talk to people who kind of represented different ideas in the science. And one of the favorite people that I talked to was this 84-year-old man who's an actor, John, who took on the memory task of trying to memorize a 60,000 word poem. And he actually did this, and then he performed it over a couple of days. And it was one of the things actually that really stood out to me in talking to him is that he had his own positive age belief that he drew on. So when he was taking on this memory task, he thought of this cellist who played beautiful music in his 80s and 90s. And that image inspired him and motivated him to take on this memory task.
Wow. You are bringing up so many memories just having this conversation. It's astonishing. Like, I can't even keep up. Literally, I'm seeing my grandmother who passed through my father's mother at 94, played the piano until she was 93, right? And I remember her passing on this knowledge of feeding Native Americans in South Dakota when she was 7, right? Born in 1901. And like, again, like, that's the thing that I think is so powerful in the positive side of aging. There's so much to be gained, and not brush people off. It's horrifying, because I believe this, I don't know about you, but I really believe that, given sitting down with almost anyone, not only is there wisdom, there's a spirit, there's a soul, there's a person there that has gained and garnered something, that we all have this autonomy, that we're going through this, on this fantastical blue planet, flying around trying to figure it out. And I think there's amazing wisdom that we're losing, period, plain and simple. But then we're also, here's the other tsunami. We have this tsunami of ill health, tsunami of, our modern day world is certainly made turning on the faucet and turning on lights, and having controlled environments and cars and everything else. We've certainly made conveniences, but at the same time, we have inflammatory foods. We have things that are forcing us to not age well. So it's like, so like, where is the cross section between having positive age outlook as it relates to the intersection of what we can do to our health? Like I guess the other way of saying that is, how are we affecting ourselves in aging when we have this negative belief patterns that we're taking on, and how can we then improve that? And maybe then it kind of helps this entire web moving forward.
Yes, yeah, I think you're definitely getting at something really important, and I think yeah, and so I think that there is this kind of snowball effect. So I think once we can shift our beliefs from beliefs about decline to beliefs about thriving, so we can shift from these negative age beliefs to more positive age beliefs, we've found in our research that there can actually be this sort of snowball effect. So it can lead to, so this improvement in age beliefs can lead to improvement in different kinds of mechanisms, like improved health behaviors, reduced stress levels, and sort of changes even in physiological markers such as cortisol levels. And those in turn can lead to improvements in health outcomes. So, and then when we see improvements in health outcomes, that can sort of circle back. So when older people are becoming sort of more vibrant and having more opportunities, that can improve the beliefs about aging in the culture, and that in turn can, lead to further health benefits. So yeah, so I think you're really getting at something, that there's this back and forth between things that are happening in the culture and these age beliefs and then our health.
Yeah. So what are some of the shocking or interesting studies you've seen in like changing a belief pattern as it relates to straight up is that lowering cortisol, inflammation that is sprinting us towards Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, you name it? Have you seen strong correlations as it relates to things like that?
Yeah, so in my research, I've looked at a range of different kinds of health outcomes. So I have found evidence that people who've taken in more positive age beliefs have a lower risk of developing dementia, have a lower risk of showing some of the brain changes, such as have a lower, they tend to show less decline in hippocampal volume, which is the part of the brain that we use to form memories. We see people who've taken more positive age beliefs have better mental health outcomes. They have a lower risk of developing depression and anxiety. And then we've also seen that those who've taken more positive age beliefs tend to have some better kind of physical health outcomes, such as balance and functional health. So recovery after somebody's had disability. So yeah, so we actually, I think because the age beliefs themselves act as lens to, and it's sort of, we call it an upstream factor. So in the book, I talk about how there's sort of upstream factors and downstream factors. So age beliefs, I think, are an upstream factor that we take in from society, and that can have a range of impacts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's, positive mental outlook. I don't know why we don't use that medicine more often for anything. But again, I think your point is we have to allow these things. We have to ask the right questions, and we have to allow ourselves to see that which we haven't been able or willing to see, because culturally this is just what I do. This is just who I am. And it's shocking to me, moving out of Minnesota years ago, that sometimes I come back and the age that has fallen upon friends that I'm exactly the same age with, and then they say things. I've heard a 35-year-old say things. Well, I'm 35, and I thought he was kidding. Like it was a small like you're like, whoa, right? So that is like crazy to me that people, well, how many times have you heard people, well, I am 50, I am 40. Well, this is what it's like when you're 70, whatever the hell the story is. It's like, wow, you just bought into this crazy idea. And then now what is that idea having on you? Right?
Right. Yeah, that's a great observation. And I think that's something that's really key, this idea of blaming age itself for problems rather than thinking about all the other factors that might be going into whatever it is. And some of those we could probably change or improve, but by this kind of immediate blame on age, that can lead people to sort of feel a sense of resignation and feel kind of dismissed. And so that's actually in the book, I present this 3-part method. And so the first is actually to raise awareness. And the second is actually to shift blame. So exactly what you're talking about is becoming aware of how we think about causes of things. And when we say, oh yeah, well, it's, because this person is 85 that they're having this problem, but there could be so many reasons that go into any kind of problem, including ageism. So I think taking that moment and thinking could there be other things that are going on? Could there be some cultural things that I need to kind of become aware of? Can be really key.
Yeah, and it's it's a little flippant, right, for us to reduce things down, and we do it all the time. Our brains want to reduce everything. Well, it's this molecule, it's this thing, it's this because I did that, and it's like it's almost impossible unless we take, hey, this arsenic, yeah, that's gonna kill me, but really we're trying to do that all the time, and it's almost like, do you see it then as a little, what I think of is this kind of falling into this victimization side of things, right? So it's like, well, I'm 70 and this is what 70-year-old people do. I'm 80, I'm 30, whatever it is. Or it's also the reverse. These poor college kids coming out of school and like, I should know what I want to do for the rest of my life, right? It's like, no, you don't. Like, it's okay. Take a breath, like breathe in life, go make some mistakes, right? It goes both ways, right?
Exactly.
And then we put this pressure on all of us, right? And then we're trying to sprint away from aging, but at the same time, the beliefs we're having going against us are doing push-ups in the parking lot. And so it's really important. So what do you think then is, I'm just so excited about this topic. It's just so cool,
That's great.
because it is bringing up a lot of stuff, I think positive stuff for me around. Um, so then what do you think, if you could construct a way, and people listening right now going, well, what does it look like to have, positive or beneficial or successful aging? What does that look like? What could one do? Coming from this conversation, guaranteed people are going boom, like, whoa, I've never heard this. And yet, why haven't I? Because I know exactly what she's saying in terms of like, I intuitively, just like what's going on with me. There's a 12,000 stories and experiences coming into my brain just having this conversation. So what is success in this area, and how can people, aside from definitely reading your book, I can't wait to devour it, and everyone else should too. So what does that look like? What would you do to create more success around this?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and yeah, that's exciting that it's bringing different memories to your mind. But in terms of in writing the book, one example of successful aging that I found out about in writing the book is actually an example from Zimbabwe. So I had the opportunity to learn about this great model called the Friendship Bench, which is actually, it's grandmothers who come together and they meet people on these benches in their community of all different ages, and they try to help them with different problems that they come to them with. And it's just, to me, it's just a really nice example of successful aging, because the culture really values these older women, and that's part that motivates them to take on this role of trying to improve mental health of their community. But then also by taking on this role of being kind of mentors to people who are having challenges and really listening to them and sharing stories with them in this sort of safe space, they improve the mental health of the person that they're talking to, but they also improve their own health. So there have been some great studies of the grandmothers themselves, and by taking on this positive age-believed role, they improve their own health. And then that in turn validates the beliefs of the community. So I really think there can be this back and forth relationship between the positive beliefs about aging and the role of older people integrated into society, and that further elevating their beliefs about aging, which can lead to health benefits. So, right. So I think there are some really good examples out there that we could think about.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, you can imagine then, again, the wisdom of because it's different than parents, right? There's a certain level of parents, kids aren't going to listen, right? So you have this kind of other group or other mentors that are wise, that they can go to, that they can trust. And then, I mean, I think of the teenagers, all of us as teenagers now, teenagers when we were whatever it is, you're definitely not going to listen to your parents. But if there's and how much do we need that right now more than ever, right? We need the support, and that support of networks. Like, what would that, how cool would that be if you could set up those networks where it's not, again, that breaking down those barriers of those old people over there just getting ready to die, and you're creating an incubator of connection, and not just a flippant field trip, right? It is a consistent kind of connecting point, so that not only can the kids benefit, but now the older generation has a sense of purpose that is truly contributing and not just thrown away.
Exactly.
So how the hell could we set that up? How could you set that up? What are some ideas?
Yeah, so I think you're getting at something that's really key. So we know in our country, we've gone from being one of the most age integrated countries in the world to one of the most age segregated countries in the world. And I think, but I think we can reverse that, or we can, and one thing I think we can kind of do in our everyday life is just even think about, so if you think about who are your closest friends, like, so say you come up with your 5 closest friends, and then think about how old are they, like what are their ages. And so I think for most people, like myself included, a lot of those people are pretty close to one's own age. And so most of my close friends, when I immediately think about it, are within a few years of my age. And so if that's the case, that's kind of a call for thinking about, well, how can I strengthen some of the ties to people who are of different generations? Because we know intergenerational contact can be a great way to also benefit and strengthen positive age beliefs. And I think, there's often people have activities that could be pretty intergenerational, like whether it's running or bicycling or pottery or book club. I mean, so there often are things that people already are interested in that could be a way to kind of bring the generations together.
And certainly just the grandparents connecting back with their grandkids and things like that, and making that a point. I mean, that's certainly a start. I have this other, I remember an interview, actually, because that's another memory that popped in my head, of Prince.
Wow.
He, yeah, random. They asked him, well, how old are you? Well, or when your birthday was or is or whatever. And he didn't answer. And I said, I only had one birthday, the day I was born. And he didn't celebrate his birthday after that. He goes, and then he kind of cheeky, but you knew it was kind of true to him. He said, why do you think I still look good? Right. So it's interesting. Have you thought of that? How we tie age to, because this calendar thing, it's like, and then we drum up, I'm 30, I'm 40, I'm 50, I'm 60, I'm 70. Oh my God. Oh, 50. Oh, 60. Oh, 70. Oh, 8. And then even in the society itself, well, now the new 40 and 60 is the new 40 and all this stuff. What are your thoughts on the granulation of identifying to and you can celebrate it too, but what's your thoughts on that calendar kind of idea of age?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Actually, yeah, I love your Prince story. Is that your Minnesota connection that you got to interview him?
Yeah. I didn't interview him. It was an interview I watched.
Oh,
right.
Okay, got it.
But
Okay,
but he was my first concert, by the way. My first concert
cool.
as a kid was and I even went to, I was from a small town, so when I went to Minneapolis for school, I went to his concert, and it was Purple Rain.
So, how cool. Great. Yeah. So in responding to your question, so age is interesting because there's no biomarker, there's no single test that we can take to know somebody's age. So we're not like trees that have rings that you can count to know how many years somebody's been on the planet. So it's really something that has all these factors that go into it. And we know that only about 25% of aging health is due to our genetics, and there's 75% that are due to all these other factors, including psychological, environmental factors. And one of the ones that seems really important are age beliefs, which is what I've been studying. But in terms of your question about kind of the different ages, and I mean, I think every age has got things to celebrate, and challenges. So I don't think there's anything about a particular age that should be, distressing, or that should be celebrated more than others. I mean, probably every age should be celebrated. And I think some cultures that value aging actually see these later celebrations, these later birthdays, as something to really mark in a wonderful way. And there certainly are people, in our country that do celebrate, have these big blowout parties as they get older. So, and I think though, yeah. So I think there's nothing about actually counting that should be good or bad. It should just kind of be something that we do that is just part of the life cycle, part of just getting older and days passing.
Yeah, I think, for me personally, the barometer I use on birthdays, regardless of kind of age, really is, am I on the path that I truly love? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so every time the birthday comes around, it's a self-assessment of something I really practice daily, like in a, meditative or whatever. So that, to me, I think when you have a midlife crisis or things like that, when people are working for a certain thing under some sort of constraint of society pressure rather than what they truly want, that's where I think age really slaps them in the face, because they've been doing something that they may not feel like that is their calling or their passion, but they're just doing it for a paycheck. Now, listen, we all need to work for a paycheck at certain periods of our life or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. God forbid, I've made a lot of mistakes and things with my hands. But if you're on the path of passion and looking for that stuff, that seems to play a role in, the contribution of how fast we age or however. So I think the thing, have you had any, it's just several random side thoughts that I have, but maybe not so random, but the idea that if you were to label or give percentages of something that, because you have work of, I don't know if you talked to Dr. Walter Longo, he's got a lot of longevity researcher, amazing guy. And, of course, certain level of calories restriction is great, and keeping the protein levels low. So we can start to quantify things. And certainly I've actually met him in Sardinia, and we looked, and I actually sat again. This is so funny we're having this conversation, because I realize it's always been something kind of weirdly important to me. I was sitting down with a 100-year-old woman. She was 101, I think, and I was astonished at this point, and I said, and this was weird. Now that I think about it, I assumed she was married at some point in her life, and I said, "When did your husband pass away?" And she goes, "Oh, I never was married." I was like, "Really?" I go, "Can I ask why?" And she goes, "I didn't think about it." I was like, "What?" And so what she said was, she was a nurse most of her life, taking care of people, kind of serving a purpose, and just kind of didn't ever really stop to think that she needed to fill something up, right? And I just thought that my mind was blown, and I was like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
And for a woman at that age to not feel that pressure, to feel like she needed to do that, was just, I thought, phenomenal.
Right.
Like, life altering moment for me.
Yeah.
So what are some, if you were to give a percentage of how influential your outlook on age was, what do you think that would contribute? If, genetics and what we're doing and our environmental factors and all of that stuff, what would you prescribe it as?
So you're saying what percentage of of our health.
Influence, yeah, like
Yeah.
influence can it have on ourselves based on how we're viewing our own aging? I mean,
Yeah,
it's a,
so right. I mean, so every outcome has a, a slightly different association or different relationship, but so and then we also in my research that I describe in the book, I have different types of methods that we look at. So sometimes I will do like an experimental study where I randomly assign people to different types of age beliefs. Sometimes I've been able to look at people cross-culturally, so comparing age beliefs in cultures that have more positive age beliefs to cultures that have more negative age beliefs, have more ageism in their everyday lives. And then the other way that I've looked at this question is over time. So I've been able to work with some data sets of people who've been interviewed a long time ago. And then I've been able to match their age beliefs to health outcomes many years later. So including one study that I did with the Baltimore longitudinal study of aging. And in that study, what was quite helpful, quite interesting, was that people were as young as 18 or 20 were asked about their age beliefs decades ago. And the investigators had taken a number of health outcomes, including likelihood of having a cardiovascular event. And what we found is that those who had taken in more negative age beliefs at the start of the study, who were in their 18, who were like say in their early 20s, when they turned 60, when they reached their 60th birthday, if they'd taken in more negative age beliefs in young adulthood, they were twice as likely to have a cardiovascular event like a heart attack or a stroke after they turned 60. So I think what was really important in this study that we noticed is that it starts really early. So ideally, prevention of the negative age beliefs and ageism would actually start very early, because it's future selves, that future aging health that many decades later that can be impacted.
oh wow, now you just opened up a Pandora's box. So now, because this is a long, this is probably a question we all have. And when we look at kids and they're eating crap and they're doing whatever, how do we get people to care? Hell, just across the board, right? Because it's like if you're 30, you're going to be 40. And if you're 40, you're going to be 50. And you're 50, you're going to be 60. And that's a lot of time, right? That we could be forging health. What can we do? Because you don't, if you're 20 and you look perfect in some way, and you don't have wrinkles and you're not seeing the certain things, how can we impress upon these kids to say, hey, what you're doing now is forging a path of your life, period. And you're going to sit in that 40-year-old seat, and those effects are going to be what you're going to be sitting with. How do we bring that up in the lexicon of their attention, and really our attention, because we are still got plenty of life to live.
Right. So yeah, so that's a great observation. So this is something I think about a lot, because I teach young adults in a school of public health where I work, and I teach a class on health and aging. And a lot of the students start the semester with no idea that they have age beliefs. They have no idea about ageism existing in the culture. And I think that part of the reason that they don't have that knowledge is because we live in such an age segregated society, and ageism can be so baked into the structure of our society. But what I would say, though, is that by the end of the semester, most of the students are very aware that ageism exists all around them. They start to notice it, everywhere, and they become really angry about it. And a lot of them want to go forward and change it. And and we know that young people have been very active in social movements today and have taken leadership role. So I think with overcoming ageism and seeing the importance of it, I think we can raise that issue for people of all generations, including young adults. And so it's both people that they love. So everybody, has older people that they love, and most people do. And they also can see it as their future self. So if people get that awareness of what they're going to, this is decades down the line, you're going to be in this position. I think it makes people shift their beliefs and want to take on the tools to recognize the negative age beliefs and ageism, and then shift them to more positive beliefs.
Yeah, I think the thing that pops up the most is, and what a great position to be in, and to educate and to pass on this awareness to them so that they become aware. And when you have aware, you have more choice. When you have more choice, you can take action on that which you now are aware of. And that's
exactly.
and that's the beautiful thing about you writing Breaking the Age Code and you dedicating your life to the research. And so I just want to say I had a absolute blast on this conversation. I'm so stoked to be able to have, because it's like it literally didn't think I'd ever have this type of conversation, and because of you forging this path and dedicating yourself to it, it allows this, and then let's proliferate that message into the world, because I think it's powerful. And I think, again, there's wisdom to be had, not only in our own awareness, but also in our great aging populations. So let's extract that knowledge to help us move forward. So Dr. Becca Levy, I am so stoked. Thank you so much. And let's stay in touch for sure. I want to know what you're up to.
Thank you. Wonderful to talk to you. Really enjoy your podcast. So thank you.